Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 56 of season 3 of Brody Sports Talk. My name is Sean Morgan, and I am joined by two very excellent colleagues. But they're unfortunately not here, so instead of filling in, I've got two schlubs, Derek Rusnick and Caleb Walgren. Hi, schlubs. How you doing?
It's a great day to be a schlub. It's definitely how it feels to be a fan of the green and yellow team that I currently support.
Hey, actually, no, I take that back. Let me restart. My name is Sean Morgan, and I'm very happy to be here. My team won this weekend. Speaking of teams that won this weekend, Derek, how you doing today?
Feeling great.
Feeling great. Speaking of teams that didn't win, Caleb, how's the misery going? Is it going well? Doing okay?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Oh, poor guy. Well, it is officially time to talk about our Week 1 power rankings. I guess it would help if you're watching this on YouTube if I actually put Week 1 instead of Week 2. So let me correct that really quick while we are totally recording. It has been done. But it is time for the best power rankings on the planet. This is the episode everybody looks forward to each and every week. And by everybody, I mean me, but I hopefully mean everybody as well. So if you are new to what power rankings are, it is where we take all 32 NFL teams, we throw them in a big pot. We end up ranking them 1 through 32 across division, across conference, based on how good we think they are compared to their respective peers. We combine my rankings, Caleb's rankings, and Derek's rankings alongside two additional sets of rankings provided to us by one is provided by Zach from Clutch Crew Sports, and the other one we get from Luke, who has appeared on the podcast before. Throw them all in a big pot, and then we get spat out 1 through 32 all NFL teams. Now, we do things slightly differently with our podcast, or with our power rankings here on the podcast. We do split everything into 4 tiers. At this point, I think my spiel is pretty consistent. So I'm going to go into teacher mode. Caleb, what does the playoff tier represent?
The playoff tier is the best of the best, and those are the teams that are virtual locks for the playoffs.
That is correct. 1 point for Caleb. Derek, what does the aspiring tier mean? What are these teams all about?
So these are the teams that are on the cusp of being into the playoffs. They are teams that could make the playoffs via wild card or just on the outside looking in.
I love the choice of words, so I'm actually going to give you a point and a bonus point because you definitely listen to how I phrase things. So we're going to go back to Caleb for the wavering tier. Caleb, what are teams 17 through 24? What does a wavering tier mean?
The wavering tier. They're not good, but they're not the worst. Totally not quoting Sean.
Somebody did not study for this pop quiz. Well, I'll finish it off with the teams 25 through 32. That is the basement tier. These are teams that have, at this time, no chance of making the playoffs. Still early in the season, so they may crawl their way out. But based on early indications, they're probably going to remain in the basement, maybe at best getting into the wavering tier later on this season. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. So coming in at number 1, I think to nobody's surprise, is the Kansas City Chiefs. Number 2, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 3, the Los Angeles Rams. 4, Buffalo Bills. 5, San Francisco 49ers. 6, Seattle Seahawks. 7, Cleveland Browns. And then coming in at number 8, I think probably making one of the biggest leaps, are the Arizona Cardinals. Now, there are a lot of interesting storylines, I think, in this particular tier. One is, hey, the Buffalo Bills really didn't drop a whole heck of a lot despite a loss. And hey, kind of the same thing for the Browns. You know, where are the Steelers? Where are the Chargers? Like, where are the Saints? So those are all great and cool storylines and all, but I actually want to talk about the Seahawks. And the reason I want to talk about the Seahawks is because both of you guys at the beginning of the season during our predictions were not very high on the Seahawks. Whereas I was the only one, I believe, that actually predicted that they would secure a playoff berth. Now, they had a fantastic opening game. So I wanted to pick your guys' brains a bit, because when I look at how you ended up ranking the Seahawks respectively, Caleb, you had them coming in at number 9, and then Derek, you and I agreed we had them coming in at number 4. So has your, I know it's just 1 week, has your tune changed a little on the Seahawks? Are you seeing some things that maybe make you wonder, is this team like going to legitimately challenge for this division? Or maybe is this more of a, they're good right now, but I need to see more? I'll let either one of you take the reins on that first.
Yeah, so I've been a Seahawks fan for a while, other than that one Super Bowl that they beat the Broncos. My brother-in-law is a Seahawks fan, and so I follow them and try to keep up with them. The issue is that this is the 17-game season, and they look really good week 1, and they tend to do that. As you'll talk to any analyst, they'll say offenses are the best at week 1. Go throughout the rest of the year, defenses are gonna figure them out. So right now they're great. They're gonna do a good job, but we'll see where they're at in week 14, 15, that area.
Okay, that's fair.
Caleb?
So one thing that I have heard used recently, I think I was listening to the Move the Sticks podcast, but they talked about a term for a team that was called studs and scrubs. And I do think that when you look at the studs on the Seahawks, they are great. I don't know if they have the overall depth for the long haul, but Gerald Everett, who is a newcomer, looked fantastic, getting a touchdown grab. I feel like the Colts really tried to shut down DK Metcalf, and so the beneficiary of that was a speedy receiver himself, Tyler Lockett. The Seattle offense, I mean, they put up, over 30 points against the Colts? And the Colts are not
Close,
a bad
28.
defense.
28.
28, okay, so close to 30. In general, that means you're taking advantage of your opportunities in the red zone. You're converting for touchdowns, and that's what Seattle needs to do. They need to be able to get it into the end zone time and time again. And I really feel like it was definitely this Russ is the star, and we weren't necessarily seeing quite as much of a reliance on Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, and the running game. Because it is the first game under the O coordinator, so we'll see how that goes long term. But I think that it was a good sign. And I think that they can compete for the division. It just depends on how everything falls. That division is very topsy-turvy. I want to say, based off of our power rankings, we had all 4 NFC West teams in the top tier. They're all in the playoff tier.
Yeah, they are. That's actually true. I just now realized that with the Cards making number 8.
It's something's got to give. They may be literally 4 of the top 8 teams in football, but they're probably not all making the playoffs.
Yeah. So I think these are excellent points by both of you. One thing that really stood out to me, and then we'll go ahead and we'll talk about some of the aspiring tier teams, is that a lot of Seattle's wins, I really feel like over the last 3 years, and I'm pretty sure if we go back and we listen to maybe some Seahawk-centric episodes, whether it be season reviews or season previews or something, is a lot of Seattle's victories always felt very haphazard and not want to say fluky, but it felt like it could go any particular direction. And it was always, I really like that studs and scrubs, because I think that really sums up a lot of what Seattle has been in recent years. What really impressed me the most here was how reasonably balanced their offensive attack was, and how I never really felt like the game was in doubt. I mean, they led by 2 possessions for like 30 plus minutes. And at no point in time did you ever really feel like the Colts were going to claw their way back into that game. And they didn't look terrible. The Colts didn't really look all that bad. But Seattle managed to contain them very, very well and did everything that they needed to do offensively without getting it, like, being too risky. So I think this is promising. It is a question mark whether or not we see it long term. But for me, the promise is there, and especially comparison to some of the other top teams that we saw in this particular tier. Some of them looked shaky. The Rams are really the only ones I think that didn't look all that shaky. But we saw close games for the Chiefs and the Bucs where they had to come from behind. I mean, the Cardinals were a surprise. The Browns lost. The Bills lost. And the 49ers gave up 30-plus points to the Detroit Lions. So in reality, this is a weird circumstance where the Seahawks, I think, for my rankings anyway, benefited from a lot of uncertainty up at the top. Let's go ahead and move on to the aspiring tier. Again, as so eloquently and wonderfully put, these are teams that are trying to make it in the playoffs, but for one reason or another just quite aren't there. Or if they are, they're looking, at a wild card berth. So coming in at number 9, Los Angeles Chargers. 10, Pittsburgh Steelers. 11, Baltimore Ravens. 12, Miami Dolphins. 13, New Orleans Saints. 14, Philadelphia Eagles. 15, Green Bay Packers. And rounding out the aspiring tier at 16 are the Dallas Cowboys. Again, a lot of very interesting storylines here. The Saints, coming out with a 5-touchdown, Jameis Winston eating that W. The Cowboys actually looked competitive against the Bucs. The Ravens with that, overtime thriller, the Steelers managing to trounce the Bills through that defense. I want to talk about the Eagles, though. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can definitely see that I came prepared for this. So just to give an early idea, Caleb, you had the Eagles coming in preseason at number 23. Derek, you had them coming in at number 25, as did I. So this is probably an earlier entrance into the aspiring tier than I think a lot of people would have expected a team like the Eagles to show up in the power rankings, because there were so many question marks around Hurts, around this coaching staff, around defensive health, whether or not our wide receiver core was actually going to be worth a dang. There were just so many questions. And they came out and they absolutely trounced the Atlanta Falcons in a game where the Falcons were favored and where a lot of people were predicting that this is where we're going to start seeing, a Falcons resurgence. It did not happen. The Falcons were beaten just about every single aspect of the game. So before I, get too hyped up, were there any takeaways that you guys had from that game, whether it be how good the Eagles were or how bad the Falcons were, or a combination of either one? We'll go to you first, Caleb, because we went to Derek first during the playoff tier talk.
So I definitely think that Devonta Smith looked really good. I know that in general he is the star receiver on the team, and if teams are going to have to start double covering him, it's really going to open up the middle for Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. I think people forget that Goddard and Ertz are so good at being able to help move the chains. And I also felt like the rushing attack looked far more promising than it has in, possibly any time under Peterson. I know it's a new coaching staff. Nick Sirianni and the guys went out there and took care of business. Like you said, it was a blowout. It was 32-6, and I think that that's part of why the Eagles are here. One thing that I will be curious about, because I did see it in some highlights, is I'm curious how the Eagles will do if they face a more mobile quarterback. And potentially they might see one on the field some this next week in Trey Lance, but it might just be for 3 or 4 gimmick plays. Because Matt Ryan really looked like old man Matt out there.
Yeah, he definitely showed his age.
It was not pretty trying to see Matt Ryan do some of the things that I think we would have expected out of Ryan Tannehill in an Arthur Smith offense. Matt Ryan is no Ryan Tannehill.
No.
Not even close. So, let's not forget Tannehill played wide receiver at college before he converted to quarterback. So he's an athlete first and a quarterback second, whereas Matt Ryan is a quarterback, and that's it.
No, I completely agree. I think that it is week 1, so there are still a lot of question marks on how is A team going to deal with B situation. And I feel like there were a decent amount of questions that were answered for a lot of teams. And there were a lot of little things that I saw the Eagles do that really impressed me. Before I go into that, Derek, any additional thoughts on that? Or do you want me to dive right into my Eagles giddiness?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to overlap with you on my comments, but not. I don't want to offend you, Sean, but this is the first time that I have seen the Eagles not waste talent that they have on their team. So they're using Jalen Hurts well. Um, he's both throwing the ball, running the ball effectively, efficiently. Smith, as Caleb said, looks like he's going to be who we thought he was coming out of college. And so maybe this is the coaching staff that actually gets the Eagles to the point of how this is a really good team, and they play to their talent. So that's my thoughts.
So actually, I like that, and I want to build on that because I think that's a very, very excellent point. For me, one of the pitfalls of Peterson is I really didn't feel like he got as much out of specific players post Super Bowl. There was definitely a very huge Super Bowl hangover, and a lot of these players, they kind of sort of gave up. I feel like under Sirianni, we're seeing a bit of a resurgence, and I think a lot of that is the new coaching staff, and I also think a lot of that is Jalen Hurts, and I think it's the switch out of Wentz, who ended up proving to be very much a toxic locker room presence. And a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, you don't really see that from Hurts, who had an excellent game. 75% completion, 3 touchdowns, 250 passing, 60 rushing yards. There are a few miscues, but for the most part, during week 1, you're going to expect, to a certain extent, to see some of that. I thought we ran a great 2-minute drill offense. Devonta Smith, like you said, a fantastic game. I was actually very impressed by the defense, especially early on when we had some bend but don't break moments where we gave up quite a bit of yardage on some early possessions, but then managed to stifle them when it counted. And that's been a very much a hallmark of the Eagles' defense for such a long time. It's really great to see it. But before we transition, one last thing. I was actually very impressed with Kenny Gainwell, and I think he's an excellent addition to our basically our running back roster. Now, I do worry that Boston Scott is going to very much be on the outside looking in going forward. And if you're thinking about picking him up as a handcuff for Miles Sanders, think again. Grab Gainwell. Do not go the Boston Scott direction. I know this isn't Fantasy Friday, but a word to the wise, Boston Scott has probably lost that number 2 spot.
I do want to say, I told you, especially in Dynasty Leagues, to pick up Kenneth Gainwell back when we did our Eagles season preview back in the day.
You did. Give yourself all of the props. Give yourself as many props as you can. Let's go to the wavering tier. These are, again, our teams that probably won't make the playoffs, but very well could if they showcase some improvement in a couple of key areas. So coming in number 17, we have the New England Patriots, 18, the Las Vegas Raiders, 19, Denver Broncos, 20, Cincinnati Bengals, 21, Carolina Panthers, 22, Tennessee Titans, 23, Indianapolis Colts, and then rounding out the wavering tier are the Minnesota Vikings. So, again, a lot of cool storylines from week 1. Bengals with a good victory. Titans looked hopeless. Raiders, we talked about that great overtime win. Congratulations again to the Broncos on a very stifling victory. I actually want to talk about the Carolina Panthers. And there are a couple reasons for it. One, I don't think we're going to have a lot of other opportunities to talk about them based on storylines. But I want to talk a lot about Sam Darnold and what we kind of saw out of this Panthers offense. Can you think of anybody in the NFL that is happier right now to be away from Adam Gase than Sam Darnold?
Anybody who's ever played for Adam Gase, if they're away from him, they're happy right now.
I can't imagine that. Because we saw a couple of things that I think really felt positive to build from. He looked decent. He actually, I wouldn't say above average, but he did look much better than we have seen him. And I think some of that has to do with the flexibility that comes with an offense that has a player like McCaffrey both catching and running the ball. But and then this was a win, against the Jets. So you really can't account for, I think, hey, it's not like they came out and they were world beaters. But 24 for 35, 279 yards and a touchdown. He did technically also have a touchdown on the ground. McCaffrey had a decent game, both catching and running the football. DJ Moore looked good. Robbie Anderson had that really, really big touchdown. So for me, like, what is it that you think is, how can I phrase this? Do you think that Darnold is going to be able to maintain this? And do you think that maybe, just maybe, Carolina is going to surprise some people? Or do you think that perhaps this is just a moment of relief for Sam Darnold, and then maybe we're going to see him kind of regress back to what we saw at his career with the Jets? I'll go to you first, Derek, on this one.
Yeah, so I think they called the Ghostbusters and got out any ghost that Sam Darnold might have seen or not seen in the playing field. He looked much better than what he looked like in a Jets uniform. I'm not saying that Sam Darnold is going to be the second coming or anything like that, but I think this is year one of a three-year project that the Panthers are going to go through, where we know who our quarterback is, we know who our running back is, and they're going to give a bunch of money to McCaffrey when his time comes. And then they're going to rebuild everything else. I think that I'll just liken it to another team. When you know who your quarterback is for 20 plus years, the Patriots were able to build everyone else. So if Darnold shows this year that he has things in control, let's put it that way. He's not going to throw the ball all over the field or anything like that, but he's going to be efficient and he's going to keep the ball, not throw interceptions or anything like that. Then the Panthers can build around him and maybe have something in 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Caleb, any thoughts?
I think that the best thing for Sam Darnold is that he is on a team that I think is built where he can be a star despite not having to be the big star even within his own team. We all know that Christian McCaffrey currently is the face of that franchise, and it is a franchise that is being built around, I want to say, similar to like the late 2000s New York Giants type teams. I mean, Matt Rule has some connections to the Giants, so I think it makes sense. If you're talking about a team that has a fantastic defense and a quarterback that does enough to get by, I think Sam Darnold could definitely fit that mold. It's a question of how long do they keep Joe Brady around? I know even the USC job opened up and I saw his name mentioned there already. So he's got some college connections. He's got other pro connections. He was interviewed for head coaching jobs last year in the NFL. Can you keep a consistent system around Darnold? Because I think that he needs it.
Yeah.
I think that he doesn't need to have things changing and having, let's say 3 different coordinators in 3 years. So I'm excited, but I'm going to say that there's some cautious excitement. I think that he could be good, but I also think that it's a very tough division to try to rise up to the top.
No, and I definitely agree. I actually think that playing teams like the Saints and the Bucs twice a year is going to be huge for him as far as his growth. Because I almost look at him like a relatively new to the league quarterback, because he went through so many different systems and he played for such a dire team in dire straits consistently that his development may have been a little bit stunted. So I'm almost looking at this Panthers year as another rookie season for Sam Darnold. So I've kind of maybe lightened up my expectations of him. And now it's like, okay, well, what can you show me against better competition now that you're not, in such an offensively stunted system? And so we'll see how that plays out. I mean, obviously they're going to have a tough test here against the Saints. So I think we'll actually learn a little bit more here coming into week 2. Let's finish things off. Let's talk about the basement tier. These teams, as of right now, probably not going to make the playoffs. Coming in at number 25, we have the Chicago Bears. 26, and probably the biggest faller aside from the Green Bay Packers on our power rankings, the Washington football team. 27, Houston Texans. 28, Atlanta Falcons. 29, Detroit Lions. 30, New York Giants. 31, New York Jets. And 32, Jacksonville Jaguars. Man, looking at those bottom 3 teams, is this still the 2020 season, guys?
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly...
It may be a little bit of hangover.
Certainly felt like it. So speaking of a team that actually managed to get out of the very, very, very bottom tier of the basement, I want to talk about the Houston Texans. So I know the Washington football team has a kind of an interesting story at quarterback, but really the Texans were the big surprise, I think, for a lot of people that aren't named Sean Morgan coming into this particular episode. Because a certain Sean Morgan called that they were going to beat the Jaguars. Anyway, that's enough props for me. So Tyrod Taylor, without getting an injection into his lungs, seemed to do pretty darn okay. And I get that it was just against the Jags. But the Texans had made the best, I think, of their opportunity against a rookie quarterback to get quite a few takeaways. And... offensively, they looked decent. They were moving the ball well. I mean, I'm sure that Taylor's suddenly starting to see some potential movement on the waiver wire in fantasy. Was there anything, and I know that if you look at the Texans schedule, that's probably the only win they're going to get. So my question for you is, looking at the over-under that we did at the very, very beginning of the season for the Texans, it was 4 wins, and everybody picked under except for me. So after this win, they're a quarter of the way to a push. Do you guys think that this is a Texans team that's going to win more than 4 games, or are you still on the under train? And why? Caleb, we'll go to you first.
At this point, I think I'm still slightly on the under train, but I could be convinced depending on how I see them play this week. They are playing the Browns. The Browns are a team that I think we all have a lot more faith in. And when I've seen the spread for that game, I think it's 12.5. And I don't necessarily expect the Browns to go out and cover that. I think that Houston is going to play a different style of game than we might have expected. In general, you saw a team that went out and had 41 carries on the ground and only 30 pass attempts. It is David Coley. He came over from Baltimore. I think that they like the idea of being able to run. Tyrod Taylor had 4 of those carries for 40 rushing yards. So you have a mobile quarterback. Also, like you said, they had a great game on defense. And let's not forget that their defensive coordinator is actually a really good defensive coach in Lovie Smith. He may not be good at managing quarterbacks, which I can definitely say because he coached in my division for so many years. But Lovie knows what he's doing on that side of the ball. So if your game plan is going to be, hey, we're going to run it a lot and we're going to make you try to score against our defense, that's actually probably the best game plan. Brandon Cooks looked good. Let's not forget that he is still a stud at receiver. And I think that, people were probably setting the Texans on fire a little bit too soon. So I don't know. I think that in general, they could be a solid 4-win team that loses some games late or can't do well in the 2-minute offense, because I don't think that plays to their strengths. But could they push for it? I think that there's more of a push than I originally saw.
I think it's fair. I mean, 27 points in the first half. I know they kind of eased off a bit in the second half, but I mean, when you've got a 27, I think to 7 lead, sometimes it feels a little bit warranted. Derek, any final thoughts on that one?
So this is what happens when Tyrod Taylor is not looking over his shoulder as at a young quarterback who is going to take his job soon. Tyrod has never had a chance, I don't think, to actually be the leader of a team and be the starting quarterback without him being the placeholder for the time being. If this is what we're going to get from Tyrod Taylor, I can see the over. I could be convinced to get off the under train and take the over hot air balloon.
I mean, really, with as bad, I think, as the other teams in this division looked to start the season, I mean, you could very well see some capitalization on, the part of the Texans. I mean, the Titans looked embarrassingly beatable. And we still don't exactly know what the situation's going to be with the Colts, I think, long term. Because, I mean, as an Eagles fan, I know that Carson Wentz can sometimes be a very polarizing figure in that locker room. So maybe this is a chance for the Texans to be the biggest surprise, I think, of the season. Well, that is it for our power rankings. We will go through, and I'll give a file to Caleb. We'll, of course, post them on Twitter. So if you want to go and agree with us, disagree with us, have some additional comments, questions, concerns, by all means, do let us know. If you don't know how to access our Twitter, it's found on our link tree, linktr.ee/Brody Talk. Links to all of the different podcast platforms that we're on, podcast platforms where you can rate, give us a review, subscribe to us, all that good stuff. Link to our merch is there as well. Any final thoughts, guys, before we call it an episode?
Real football is back. Very happy.
Let's get to week 2.
Forget about this week 1. I mean, Derek and I are good with week 1. Week 1's good. Yeah, we can go on to week 2. I mean, yeah. Got to give you a hard time. Well, on behalf of Caleb and Derek, my name is Sean. We are Brody Sports Talk. We are signing out. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye, guys.